Acer's Nitro V16S has a surprisingly good screen, great battery life, and it's thin and portable. But there's one huge problem. Performance gets worse in longer gaming sessions. The tiny 135-watt charger just can't provide enough juice. The good news is there's a simple workaround. So let's find out if the Nitro is worth the compromise in this review. The Nitro comes in a dark finish with metal lid and bottom panel, but the interior is all plastic. The lid logo is silver, but changes color depending on lighting. There's a fair bit of flex if you're going out of your way to look for it, but it doesn't feel too bad during regular use. The hinges flex the chassis a little if you push the lid back too far. Not ideal, but also pretty easy to avoid. Otherwise, the hinges feel smooth, but the screen does wobble a bit when typing hard. The black finish is a fingerprint magnet, but it's easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. There's a groove along most of the front, which makes it easy to open, and the screen goes back a little further than most others. The Nitro is very portable. The S in V16S means slim, and it's one of the thinnest 16-inch gaming laptops we've tested, only beaten by far more expensive premium options. The laptop by itself weighs in at 4.6 pounds or 2.1 kilos, increasing to just under 5.7 pounds or 2.6 kilos with a tiny 135-watt charger included. The Nitro is one of the lightest 16-inch gaming laptops tested, making it more portable compared to most of the other laptops that I'd consider to be its direct competition. That's even more so the case with the charger included, as it comes with one of the lowest wattage power bricks we've ever seen. That may be a good thing for portability, but less power means less performance, and also battery drain while under heavy load. More on that soon. The configuration I bought has Nvidia's RTX 5060 laptop GPU, Intel's Core 7 240H processor, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 16-inch 180Hz screen. But the Nitro is also available with lower or higher tier CPUs and GPUs, including an AMD version, which you can check out with the link below. And if it has a good sale, we'll list it on our gaminglaptop.deals website so you can save money. The keyboard has 4 zones of RGB backlighting. All keys and secondary functions get lit up, and the lighting looks good. The colors are nice and vibrant. Key brightness can be adjusted between 4 levels or turned off with the F11 and F12 shortcuts, or through the Pulsar lighting tab in Acer's NitroSense software. You can also swap between 8 built-in effects through here, but you can't cycle through the effects with a keyboard shortcut like most other laptops have. I didn't mind typing on the keyboard. It's decent. It's not clicky or mushy and gives me Rubber Dome vibes. I like that we've got full-sized arrow keys, but some of you might not like the compromise of a shorter right shift and the numpad having a shorter 0. The power button is part of the keyboard, but an accidental press doesn't do anything. You have to hold it for a while before Windows asks if you want to shut down. The plastic touchpad is okay. It worked fine for me and felt accurate, but like many other laptops at this price point, there is noticeable flex if you press closer to the top. Port selection is reasonable, and thicker cables like power and HDMI run out the back and stay out of the way. Like other Acer laptops, the power cable feels like it has 2 levels of insertion. You need to push it until it clicks all the way in for it to charge properly. The display outputs offer a mix for connecting to discrete or integrated graphics, but not being able to get DisplayPort over Type-C connecting directly to Nvidia means this laptop cannot run VR. Getting inside requires removing 10 Phillips head screws, all the same length. It was easy to open with pry tools. I'll leave a link to these ones I use below. Once inside, we've got the battery down the front, 2 memory slots just above in the middle, 2 M.2 storage slots with the installed SSD on the left. Acer's website claims Gen 5 support, but doesn't say if it's for one or both slots. And the Wi-Fi 6 card sits just above the the SSD. My Nitro came with one stick of memory installed. Unlike older DDR4 memory, this still technically runs in dual channel, so we don't gain as much performance by adding a second stick. And this way, upgrading RAM is easier as you only need to buy an extra stick, rather than completely replacing the two the laptop would have come with. The upgrade score is about as good as we can expect from a 16-inch mid-range gaming laptop. We can swap both RAM slots, two M.2 storage slots, and Wi-Fi, and I confirmed that both slots can fit double-sided 2280 drives for larger capacities, no problem. Wi-Fi performance is the slowest we've tested in the last couple of years. Not quite gigabit speed, but realistically, probably still plenty for most people. Speeds from the installed 1TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD were good, but the MicroSD card slot is super slow. I guess it's better than not having one at all, but a good laptop can do almost 10x this speed. The card clicks in and sits the full way into the laptop, so no chance of bumping it, but you'll need to use fingernails. There are speakers underneath towards the front on the left and right sides. They're not very clear, only have minor bass, and there's some wrist-rest vibration. The Latencymon results weren't good in our 5-minute idle test. The Nitro is powered by a 76Wh battery. Display power saver is enabled by default, which automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60Hz when you unplug the charger to save power, and it goes back to 180Hz when you plug back in. You can enable optimized battery charging in NitroSense too. This limits the maximum charge level to 80%, which helps improve battery longevity, as leaving it fully charged for long periods of time can degrade it. Battery life was great in our YouTube video playback test, lasting for more than 9 hours, which is longer compared to most of the other laptops. I'd say a competition for the Nitro. The Aurora lasts longer, but it also has a 26% higher battery capacity, and the Nitro still lasts longer than the Tough, which has an 18% bigger battery capacity. A good result, in other words. It lost 14% of its battery charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much battery power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison. And it's one of the slower drainers out of all laptops tested. Alright, we need to address the biggest problem with the Nitro, this little guy. Put simply, the small 135W charger that it comes with isn't powerful enough to indefinitely sustain gaming workloads in the highest turbo mode. Here's what happens in Alan Wake 2 over 12 hours. I've got the battery charge level shown by the blue line, and the FPS from the game shown by the green line. For the first 2 hours or so, the game is running at around 55 FPS in turbo mode, but the battery is consistently draining, even with the charger connected. Once the battery gets to 30% charge remaining, the laptop automatically swaps to balanced mode. It doesn't let you change back to performance or turbo modes until it has at least 40% charge. The game only dips to around 49 FPS in balanced mode, and is definitely still playable, and this is without DLSS, so even higher frame rates are possible. But what happens is the laptop slowly charges its battery from 30% up to 40% over the course of 3 hours or so, while the game still runs at the lower frame rate. When the battery finally charges back up to 40% with the game still running, it automatically goes back to turbo mode, which is why the FPS in green goes back up briefly, but it only lasts for 15 minutes before the battery drains from 40 to 30%, forcing us back to balanced mode, and then it needs hours to charge back to 40% and repeat the cycle. The amount of battery drain will depend on how demanding demanding the game is. But in our test, turbo mode lasted around 2 hours. But is this actually a problem? Well, if you're gaming for a long time, performance will dip. But the dip might not actually be that big. Here's how Cyberpunk 2077 performs at all setting levels with ultra settings. Balanced mode is still capable of 72 FPS, as per the purple bar, or 82 FPS with DLSS on quality as per the red bar. Yeah, turbo mode is 12% faster than balanced mode without DLSS, or 14% faster with DLSS. But the fact is, balanced mode still delivers playable performance. We also didn't see any battery drain while testing performance mode in this game, so potentially you could just run indefinitely in performance mode and never have any battery drain while still getting decent performance. Now, I say potentially because fellow tech reviewer Just Josh did experience battery drain with the Nitro in performance mode, though it did drain slower than the higher turbo mode. Josh had the higher tier 5070 model, but both the 5070 and this 5060 max out at 85 watts of GPU power, so I'm not sure if maybe the 5070 version tries to feed the processor a bit more power, or if maybe there's some other difference between 5060 and 5070. It also may just depend on the workload. They tested with Forza Horizon 5, but our 5060 didn't drain in that game in performance mode. So for us, with the 5060, we didn't get battery drain in performance mode in Cyberpunk, Alan Wake 2, Black Myth Wukong, Forza Horizon 5, or even the long-term CPU plus GPU stress test that we do for thermal testing. But I'm still not confident to say for sure that the 5060's battery won't drain in performance mode in a different workload. It may be that balanced mode is the only true way of not draining the battery under heavy load. What's more a concern with using turbo mode is the extra strain put on the battery. Discharging it under heavy load and constantly recharging it is gonna reduce the lifespan of the battery. So for that reason alone, I'd recommend avoiding turbo mode and sticking to performance mode. Maybe even balanced mode if you still notice some drain. At least for workloads where both the CPU and GPU are active at the same time, such as gaming. Alright, thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a standard cooler with a shared heat pipe between both. Air comes in through the keyboard and through these holes on the bottom panel, and gets exhausted from the vents on both sides, and from the corners out the back. Acer's NitroSense software allows us to change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are quiet, balanced, performance, and turbo. Turbo mode overclocks the GPU, and you can't disable it. You can use the fan control tab in any mode except for quiet to set the fan to automatic, full speed, or custom to change the fans individually. But there's no fan curve for setting fan speed based on temperatures like other laptops allow. There's a mode switch key above the keyboard on the left, and the software gives you the option of using this to either swap between the different performance modes, or to act as a shortcut to enable turbo mode. The button's light changes to a different color based on the performance mode that's currently active. The internal temperatures are cool at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst case full load scenario. But the temps don't get too hot. Turbo mode does run a bit warmer compared to performance, but as mentioned, we don't recommend using turbo for long periods. Setting the fans to max lowers temperatures quite a bit, but as you'll hear soon, it can get insanely loud to achieve this. Running with the lid closed warms things up a bit, as air can no longer come through the keyboard, so keep that in mind if you plan on docking the laptop. Using a basic metal stand lowered temps a bit, while the cooling pad I test with, linked below, could lower temps even more. The Nvidia control panel says the RTX 5060 could run up to 85 watts, and that's what we see in turbo mode. The CPU also runs at around 29 watts, but we experienced around 5% battery drain every 10 minutes during this heavy stress test in turbo mode. Performance mode didn't discharge the battery in this test, and it only loses around 5 watts on the GPU, but 10 off the CPU, which is just a power sacrifice you shouldn't have to make. All Acer needed to do was use a slightly bigger charger. Clock speeds don't really change in turbo mode as thermal throttling wasn't taking place. We're always power limited, so you can use stands or cooling pads to lower temps, but they won't help with performance, unless you're in a hotter environment. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle, but it wasn't enough to drain the battery, so you should be all good to use turbo mode in CPU-only tasks. It's a little behind the only other 240H we've tested so far in Alienware's more expensive Aurora. That scores 13% higher in multi-core, as it can boost its processor above 100 watts and has a bigger 180 watt charger. Anyway, the 240H uses Intel's last-gen Raptor Lake, so performance is fine compared to the Nitro's competition, but nothing groundbreaking. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and run on battery power. On the one hand, it's still better compared to Lenovo's higher tier and more expensive Legion 5. But on the other hand, Lenovo's Legion 5 from 3 years ago is quite similar. Single-core performance is essentially unchanged on battery power, so the laptop still feels snappy off the charger. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, and the Nitro was a little below this and felt cool. It's warmer with the stress tests running, and the hottest spot in the middle feels warm, but not uncomfortable. It gets warmer in the higher balanced mode. The wrist rest and WASD still feel cool, but the center is starting to feel uncomfortable, though in theory you'd touch that spot less while gaming. Performance mode feels pretty similar, as the fans run faster and louder to compensate for the extra power and performance. It's a similar deal in turbo mode. The warmest point is fairly warm now. We can avoid this by setting the fans to maximum, but as you'll hear shortly, it's way too loud to be practical. The Nitro has one of the warmer keyboards out of all laptops tested, very similar to Acer's higher tier Helios Neo 16S. The laptops that I'd consider to be the Nitro's competition were cooler, but at the same time, it's worth noting that the hotspot on the keyboard is in between the keys. The actual keys themselves where you touch are a little below this. Let's find out how loud the fans get. The fans were only just audible when idling in silent mode, but under load in the highest turbo mode, it's not too bad compared to other laptops, especially those competing models. But don't forget, turbo mode isn't sustainable long term. Plus, turbo mode has a 23% louder perceived fan noise than performance, so being forced to stick to performance mode to avoid battery drain also results in a quieter machine. Or if you just stick to balanced mode, well, turbo mode is 89% louder than that. But look how insane maxing the fans out is. Remember, you can max the fans out in turbo, performance, or balanced modes. But it's 60 decibels, it's 59% louder compared to turbo mode in auto. But yeah, performance mode is the way to go for a quieter, cooler laptop with less or potentially no battery drain depending on the workload. It's a better sweet spot and still performs great. Even balanced mode still performs nicely and is even quieter if you'd prefer a quieter machine. The Nitro screen surprised me. Cheaper laptops like this usually cut corners with crap panels, but the color gamut is decent, contrast is average, and color accuracy is great. It gets fairly bright too. We measured above 400 nits at full brightness with a linear drop-off at lower levels. It's way brighter compared to the last Nitro I tested a couple of years ago, which didn't even hit the 300 nit baseline, and it's notably brighter compared to the laptops I'd consider to be its competition. Backlight bleed was a little patchy, but no hotspots that I'd noticed when viewing darker content, but this will vary between panels. LCD overdrive is enabled by default in NitroSense. This gives us an average screen response time of around 4 milliseconds, which is a great result. If you turn overdrive off, the panel slows a little to 6.6 milliseconds, which still isn't too bad, and this removes the overshoot and undershoot. For most people, I think gaming with overdrive on is the move, but at least you have options. It's a great result when compared against other laptops. It's up there with far more expensive and higher tier models. Most of the other models that are in the same sort of tier as the Nitro are typically much slower, because as mentioned, the screen is the first place a lot of brands cut costs. Asus's TUF was a little faster, but remember, it had a dimmer panel at below 300 nits, so the Nitro wins as a better rounded option. Total system latency was decent too. This is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on screen in Counter-Strike 2, and it's simply faster than the competition, at least in turbo mode, which again you can only use for around 2 hours. The Nitro does not have advanced Optimus. It does have a muck switch available in software or BIOS, which means you can still get better FPS in games, you just have to reboot to swap between Optimus on and off, which isn't as convenient. There's no G-Sync with Optimus off, but there's adaptive sync from the integrated graphics with Optimus on. There's a 720p camera above the screen in the middle. It doesn't have IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, and here's how it sounds while typing on the keyboard. But how well does Acer's Nitro perform in games? We've tested it with these settings to find out. Cyberpunk 2077 was running well at 1080p ultra settings. Whether we're talking about turbo mode, which is unsustainable long term, or performance mode, which didn't drain in our test, the Nitro ends up similar compared to a number of other lower powered 5060 laptops tested. It's not quite able to hit 60 FPS at 1440p, at least without upscaling features such as DLSS. But again, it's still doing better compared to other power-limited 5060 options. I didn't expect it to be matching Lenovo's higher tier lock, as it has a better processor with more GPU power. The Nitro is still doing well in Alan Wake 2, reaching 60 FPS at 1080p high settings in turbo mode, still close to that higher powered lock, and ahead of the lower powered 5060 competition. However, performance mode is a little behind, though it's not far. It's more in line with the other lower powered 5060s at 1440p. But yeah, at these frame rates, you definitely want to use DLSS to boost performance. 60 FPS in Black Myth Wukong at 1080p high settings is still possible in turbo mode, if only for a few hours. Performance mode doesn't drop back much in terms of average FPS, but 1% lows take a nosedive in this game, presumably as it doesn't like the drop from 30 watts of CPU power to 20. But if you're only playing for a bit and don't mind some battery drain, turbo mode at 1440p is 8% ahead compared to Alienware's more expensive Aurora, though this is only a 3 FPS gap, and then the best 5060 tested is only like 2 FPS ahead of the Nitro. So yeah, more power is better, but in this case, the difference isn't too much. It's a similar story with ray tracing and DLSS enabled. RT is more intensive, but combining DLSS can result in higher FPS compared to not using RT or DLSS. Though of course, you could skip tracing those rays if you just want more FPS with DLSS. The RT settings we test with actually visually improve how these games look, and in some cases at 1080p, we can still get playable frame rates. The GPU's 8 gigs of VRAM isn't as much of a concern here when paired with that 1920 by 1200 screen, but it can still be a limit in some games, even at 1080p, depending on the game and settings used. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do about it. Until Nvidia starts giving us more VRAM, the only way to get more is to spend way more money on a higher tier 5070 Ti, and that is important for all the reasons covered in this video. But at the same time, if you're considering a 5060 Nitro, I don't think your budget is going to stretch to the 5070 Ti. So it's more a case of being aware of the potential 8GB limit. Here are the 3D Mark results. Content creator results were similar to other laptops with lower powered 5060s. It's definitely capable, just not as good compared to better spec machines. But at least the Nitro has a decent screen and a MicroSD card slot, even if it is slow. The BIOS looks modern and is easy to navigate, but there's not actually much customization available through here. Linux support was decent, but the shortcut to adjust screen brightness didn't work, and the mood switch key doesn't do anything without Acer's software in Windows. Pricing and availability always change over time, so check the links below the video for updates and current sales. If the Nitro has a good sale, we'll list it on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that daily to include all of the best sales, so check it out regularly and save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. Right now, in late October, I can only find the higher tier 5070 version available on sale for $1,250 at B&H, which isn't too bad for a power limited 5070, given others like Gigabyte's Aero X16 have dropped to $1,200. For the 5060, I can only find the thicker non-S version with the same specs for $1,100. Acer is still slowly releasing their 2025 models. I've heard they delayed launching in the US due to tariffs. So yeah, you'll really have to refer to those links below for updates. So is the Nitro V16S even worth considering? Let's summarize the good and the bad to find out. Starting with the good, the Nitro punches well above its weight when it comes to the screen, with high brightness, vibrant colors, and fast response time. Battery life is great. It's got good upgrade options, keyboard lighting is a step above the competition, and it's quite portable and on the thinner side. FPS in games is surprisingly decent despite that power limited 5060. But that's where things start falling apart. Acer's tiny 135 watt charger is bad. The laptop cannot sustain turbo mode in CPU plus GPU workloads like gaming. The battery draining down to 30% after a couple of hours is bad for battery health. Fortunately, performance is still decent in balanced mode, which it automatically drops down to once the battery hits 30%. And in our testing, it looks like you can get away with performance mode and avoid severe battery drain problems. But this is still a stupid issue that Acer easily could have avoided if they just used a bigger charger. Otherwise, the Nitro is missing premium features like advanced Optimus, which Lenovo's lock has, but at least you still get a muck switch, which HP's Victus is missing, and the muck switch is at least accessible through software, whereas Gigabyte's A16 is toggled in BIOS only. The Nitro's keyboard runs on the warmer side, which is a compromise of its thinner design, though it didn't feel uncomfortable while gaming. You can resolve that by maxing out the fans, but that's insanely loud and not recommended. The build quality has a bit more flex to it than I'd like, and Wi-Fi performance is pathetic, but you should be able to upgrade that for like $20 if you want. And at the current prices, I wouldn't recommend the Nitro considering you can spend less and get more performance and a better overall machine, like Lenovo's Legion 5 with the right sale. Bottom line, I can't broadly recommend this gaming laptop to everyone. If you want best gaming performance in longer gaming sessions, run as far away from the Nitro as you can. Even playing for shorter sessions in turbo mode still isn't ideal, with extra strain put on the battery. But if you can live with the compromise of performance or balanced modes, you should get close enough performance in most cases without the battery drain, along with quieter fans and cooler temps too. And maybe for some of you, that trade-off is worth it for the Nitro's superior screen, as it does look a fair bit better compared to its competition. But honestly, all things considered, I think Lenovo's lock is a better choice for most people. Of course, it's not perfect either. either. No laptop is. It's all about finding something that has acceptable trade-offs to you and your requirements. So I'll see you in that one next for a better 5060 option.